Hello there. Happy Friday. I'm recording this on Friday evening, and to all my Canadian listeners up there, happy Canada Day. Thank you all so much for listening to the show, and I hope you all have been having a wonderful day celebrating your extraordinary country. We have a lot to get to for today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed the crossover with Dan of Locked On Capitals. No, again, I do not want Evgeny Malkin to go to the Capitals. But for today, there's updates from Elliotte Friedman on Kris Letang and Evgeny Malkin. We're going to get to that. Also, there was an update from David Pagnotta about Letang a little later on in the day. I'll get to that. And also, Pagnotta talked about DeSmith and how the Penguins could be potentially bringing him back. I'll give my thoughts on that a little later on the episode. And we're getting closer to having a full draft primer. That's going to be next week, but I'll potentially give you all a couple more names to look for at the 21 spot for this episode. I'm just teasing a couple more names for you all. I'm going to have a full draft episode sometime next week. So let's get into it right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. You want to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at @Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. So let's get into it. Some big updates from Elliotte Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast from this morning. And then David Pagnotta was also getting into some things on 93.7 The Fan later on in the day. But Friedman, so it was about the 7-minute mark of the episode with Jeff Merrick, and he lumped Letang in with Forsberg because, Forsberg, he's been beloved in Nashville for the last several years. Letang, the same thing, though it's been a lot longer to say the least. But this is what Friedman had to say. There are teams out there who are interested in both players who have told me that they think there is a path to a deal for both players to re-sign with their respective teams. I know that confused a couple people when I tweeted it out. What that means is other teams see a path for the Penguins to agree to a deal with Letang and for the Predators to agree to a deal with Philip Forsberg. Friedman also reported that it sounds like the gap of that 1.125 million gap that Friedman reported a couple weeks ago, that has shrunk a little bit. It's probably maybe, $750K to $1 million now or something like that. I think I saw a few people throw that number out there. I didn't confirm that while listening to it. At least I didn't hear him say that. But this is good news. And David Pagnotta, I lumped that in here too. He said on 93.7 The Fan today that he thinks it's probably going to be somewhere between $7 million to $8 million, and that the two sides have made progress on a new deal. So as of right now, it's funny because, when I started the offseason, I was like, I kind of think Malkin's going to come back, but I'm kind of not sure about Letang. Now I flip-flopped. I'm what odds do I want to say for this? I'm about 80 to 90% sure that Kris Letang is going to come back. But with Malkin, it's probably, maybe 40, 60 that he doesn't, 45, 55, something like that. It's crazy again that it's really just, it's flip-flopped. It's crazy. But and the Penguins, I've said this so many times already, they are right to prioritize Letang. They want to see where his number comes in. So, that in turn, how much money do they have for Malkin? What about Rickard Rakell? What about an extension for Tristan Jarry, which is, I think, Dejan Kovacevic has been talking about on his daily shot at Penguins? What about Evan Rodriguez, Danton Heinen, Kasperi Kapanen, et cetera, et cetera? So they want to get Letang out of the way. They know he's going to be the biggest number. And then from then on, they can see, okay, that's part of the jigsaw puzzle done. How are we going to do the other things? And in terms of the AAV, I would kind of be stunned if that number is below 8. I have been beating the drum 4 times 8, 5 times 8 on this show a lot during the offseason. Right now I'm thinking it probably comes in between 8.1 to 8.5. I don't think he gets over 8.5. And now if he hits the market, I could see a team maybe giving him over that. But in terms of the Penguins with how, their salary cap situation, I would think that he will get, 8.5 or a little bit below. I think that's probably as high as Ron Hextall wants to go. Now, I could see them giving him an extra year or two to bring that cap number down. So say they do give him that 5th year, which would take him to his age 40 season, right? So, maybe the AAV somehow goes below 8. Maybe it's like 7.98 or, 7.8, something around those lines. That would be good. Sure. Is the term a little bit scary? Yeah. But you have the AAV down below 8, which would be huge. That would be a massive win for the Penguins. It would probably be a bigger win for them than the Brian Rust extension that what we saw a little over a month ago when they agreed to that 6-year term, and the AAV was only a little over $5 million. I thought that was a great deal executed by Ron Hextall. A lot of people were expecting him to get 6 times 6, potentially 7 times 7 in free agency because he was probably one of the best wingers that was going to make the open market. It's trending in the right direction in terms of Letang. Hopefully within the next 11 to 12 days, a deal is reached. I have all the insiders notifications on. You all will be the first to know when a deal is struck, if a deal is struck. So really good news from multiple outlets today on Letang. But again, for Malkin, not as much. Elliotte has said numerous times on his show that, they've agreed on a 3-year term, but the money is not close. So again, I think once they hopefully have Letang done, they're going to really circle back to Malkin, dig in on that negotiation, and they're going to talk about a number that potentially works for both sides. I don't know what they're offering him right now. I know Rob Rossi and Josh Joey, I think it was mainly Rob, said it might have been in the 5s, which is way too low. I mean, that's just a low ball offer for getting Malkin at that point. It has to be at least 6, probably 6.5. I would again, because say they're so superstitious, if you can sign Gino for $7.1 million per, that would be awesome. 3 times that, 3 years at least. I think that's something you do every day of the week, in my opinion. So, that was the big updates for today and, the last couple of days with regards to the contracts negotiations of Kris Letang and of getting Malkin. If I had to make a prediction for how it goes right now, again, I think Letang is going to be on the team next year. And right now I'm going to say Malkin isn't. But, there's still a lot of time to go. Hopefully both are on the team next year. Right now, I'm thinking it's only going to be Letang because it looks like it's trending that way. The momentum is starting to really build. All these reports are positive. And I know that, Ron Hextall and Kris Letang, they're not talking. I was listening to the That's Hockey Talk podcast with Mike Rubb, and he said he spoke to Letang the other day, and he tried to get an answer out of him, and he just gave him a look. He's like, I'm not going to talk about that. And because, they made an agreement at the end of the regular season when they both were speaking to the media that, we're not going to negotiate through the media. We're not going to give updates and all that sort of stuff. I don't doubt that Elliotte Friedman has very good sources. I mean, he has plenty of contacts around the league. I believe him when he says that, there has been a little bit of momentum and that he's talked to teams who have said that they see a potential path to a deal being made with the Penguins. So I don't doubt that in the slightest. So wanted to give you all some good news to start out this segment for Friday's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Maybe something happens over the weekend. Who knows? But, we're getting into crunch time here. The draft is next week. Free agency is the week after. The Penguins, they're going to really have to be digging deep here if they want to keep either one or both players. Coming up in the next segment, we're going to get into David Pagnotta's report about Casey DeSmith, and I'll give my thoughts on whether or not it's a good move that he could potentially be coming back. So look for that coming up here in the next segment. But before I get to that, BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. And BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest, easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports, events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. You can head to the website today or use your phone to learn more about the trends in action. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. You want to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at @LONSTORPenguins. So No, there's definitely, I think, some conflicting information out there when it comes to Casey DeSmith. I was reading Josh Yohe's story on The Athletic on Thursday, and he was discussing, who stays and who goes portion of the offseason from talking to people either inside or outside the organization. And he's been steadfast on reporting that DeSmith is not coming back next year. He says that Hextall, it sounds like they want to potentially go outside the organization to get a backup for Jari. But then David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period comes in, and this is on yesterday, if I can find this report here real quick, if I can find the tweet that I had, at least for it. And I have no idea. But, Pagnotta was reporting that it sounds like the Penguins and DeSmith are in negotiations for a potential new contract. Yeah, here it was. I went through it. Excuse me. He says the Penguins are trying to sign DeSmith to a new contract. It's not yet imminent, but the two sides are working at it. We'll see if they get there in the next 2 weeks or less. My thoughts on this, I think it's time to move on. I think DeSmith is too inconsistent. I understand that he was a good backup after January, after February, he found his game, but he also was playing hurt most of that time. And then his groin area, whatever it was, gave out on him during the playoffs. He had to miss. This is the second straight year that he's had to miss the playoffs. Remember last year, he was healthy actually going into the playoffs. They were having one of their first practices before this series against the Islanders. And he tore something. I don't think it was a core muscle injury, but he tore something in the lower part of his body. And I remember reading a report that he was just like throwing his stick going into the locker room. He knew that something was up at that point. And, had he not done that and Tristan Jarry was melting down, maybe DeSmith comes in and actually saves them in one of those games against the Islanders. But, this is 2 straight seasons now where, he's gotten hurt towards the end of the season. And, I think this is also mainly 2 straight seasons where, he's been inconsistent a lot of times. I just, I think it's time to make a change at that backup position. I really don't think you can go 3 seasons in a row running the same goaltending tandem. I know it's a 1 in a million draw that both of your starting goaltenders are out for the playoffs. It's just that basically never happens, to say the least. But, do you really still want to run that small risk again? Do you want to also run the risk that he's going to be really bad to start the season like he was this past year, and then Tristan Jarry just looks burnt out by the end of the regular season? I think they need to bring in someone who's a veteran, who has proven that he can put up better numbers than DeSmith, who has proven that he can handle a potential starter's workload at times. And there are a few options out there for cheap. And I said that to a couple of followers on my social media channels the other day. Braden Holtby, I think, is a perfect fit. He is going to market now. Scott Wedgwood is going to be Jake Ottinger's backup in Dallas. He signed, I believe it was a 2-year deal, a little over $1 million per year. Holtby, there's no room for him to be on that team. So there is an option right there for the Penguins. And I think he would welcome a chance to come to Pittsburgh. I think he could potentially get 30 to 35 games a season. I just don't think that DeSmith deserves another go at it. That's my opinion. Would I be upset if they signed him? Probably not, because, in all honesty, the goaltending market, there's some options out there, but in terms of like a true backup, there's not really too many. You can do worse than DeSmith, but, I also think they will have at least a little bit of cap room to do a little bit better for him. And it's funny that my dog is he's looking at me as I'm recording this. He's been a little sick the last couple of days, but I'm not sure if he's agreeing with me or not. You agreeing with me, buddy? Yeah, I think he did a crooked head, so I'd like to think that he thinks I'm right with that. Anyways, getting back to what I was saying, if they do sign him, it's probably going to be a 1-year deal, 1.2 million, something like. I don't think he's going to get to 2.5 million to be Tristan Jarry's backup. I think it's going to be a lot cheaper than that. But it is funny that they're in negotiations for him right now, at least according to Pagnotta. Even though, and obviously Josh Yohe's reporting something different, but they're also doing the Kris Letang thing, and they're kind of playing a little hardball with Evgeny Malkin. So not really sure where Ron Hextall's priorities are right now. That's definitely a little bit weird, to say the least. But there's still a long way to go. This DeSmith thing is probably going to go down to the wire, I think, too. If I had to guess, I don't think he'll be signed back if none of their other options that are available to them sign with the Penguins on free agent day, which is July 13th. So as I'm recording this right now, that is 12 days away. But I don't know. I think, it's time for a fresh start there. And, Frank Saravelli, he also reported in some of his rumblings on Daily Faceoff that he thinks the Penguins will be on the goaltending market this year to get a capable veteran backup for Tristan Jarry. And I think a lot of other fans in the fan base have been saying this as well. I've been beating that drum, especially when I did DeSmith's season review. This past, I've been, saying that, he was good down the stretch, probably played a little bit better than Jarry, but I also add that up to, Jarry, he played in almost 60 games this year. That's too much for him. If he can be playing, maybe 45 to 50, somewhere around those lines, and you have a capable backup that can put up maybe like a 9-12, 9-17 to 9-17 save percentage, I think the Penguins are winning in that regard, because, you go down here and you look at the stats, DeSmith this season played 26 games, was a little below goals saved above expected, minus 0.6 there, 914 total save percentage, 2.79 goals against average. His expected goals against average is 2.77. In terms of, where Tristan was, where he finished outside the top 10, 919, saved 13 goals above expected, 2.42 goals against average for there. And, a 914 save percentage, that's fine. You can mainly win with that, but, it's the goals saved above expected part that, that's the one I think that's getting me a little bit. And the fact that his goals against average was almost at 3 as well. So that wraps up the second segment of Friday's episode. Coming up in the third segment, I'm going to get to a couple more names that could be on the Penguins' radar at pick number 21. I will say this. I will save that for the next segment. But before I get to that, if I can load this up here. From the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given coconut brownie chunk the Puffs treatment. That's right, the coconut brownie chunk Built Bar flavor you love, and a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling and listen. They are good for you. They're low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and all of them are delicious. All Built Bars are made with protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. You can eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow this show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. If I'm just loading something up here on my phone. So this is big though. Me and Jason's big board for the Penguins is just about complete. Again, I will have a full draft preview episode next week for the Penguins and the number 21 draft pick. Okay, hold on. I had to take a pause on the recording. So Thrawn was actually he had to go out because he's still only a 5-month-old puppy. But anyways, getting back to what I was saying. So Jason and I of Penguins Twitter, we are just about done with our draft board. I'm going to have a full draft episode coming up next week. But I wanted to touch on a couple other players who I think could be available here at 21. Frank Nazar, I think he, really strong center, right-hand shot, 175 pounds. A couple of his comps, it looks like from what I've read from, elite scouting and all this, Joe Pavelski, Braden Point, he could arrive in the next couple of years. He's probably one of the best centers in this draft. Could he go before the Penguins pick? Sure, but I definitely think he could be one of the top candidates to be picked there. And I also will say, Ivan Miro Shineko, he's going to be really good. And I probably just botched his last name. Miro Shineko. Basically, some of these Russian last names are just insane to pronounce. Again, left wing, but he also shoots right. Couple of comps for him: Vladimir Tarasenko, Timo Meier. He could arrive as soon as next year. Miro, in my opinion, I personally think that he is a top 5 talent in this draft. When I go on YouTube and when I watch him play, just has that booming shot, really good skater. His play away from the puck is also pretty strong. I don't think he'll be on the team next year if he's the Penguins pick, but I definitely think that he is also another very strong candidate to be picked if he is there. And, especially if, the Penguins don't care about the whole situation going on back in Russia. I do think some Russian players are going to fall just due to it. But, I'll be curious to see if Ron Hextall and Brian Burke, if they decide, to make a pick with Miro, because, again, I think he's probably a top 5 talent in this draft class. At least that's how I see it. And, when you have a comp, like Vladimir Tarasenko, and, sure, who knows if he ever lives up to that hype. But, I think he has the potential to be a steal when the Penguins pick, at least in my opinion. Again, I have a full draft preview episode coming up a little later on next week. I did want to get to a question here real quick to end the show. Let me find it here real quick. I believe Jackson Hollister, shout out to you for asking me this. He goes, what do you think about the Penguins signing Calle Jarnkrok for the bottom 6? And Jackson, it's funny because people were asking me about him during the trade deadline, like, who did the Penguins acquire him? And, his numbers, they're fine. But my biggest thing, man, I think the Penguins have too many of those kind of players, right? Those defensive first players who, sure, they can chip in a little bit, right? But, is he kind of maybe just a little bit better than Brock McGinn, a little bit better than Teddy Bluger, both players who they can chip in offensively, but, they're more so known for playing defense. Same when Zach Aston Reese was here and all that stuff. Even on the third, well, I shouldn't say on the third, because, Rodriguez, it was more offense. Jeff Carter, he had almost 20 goals last year. Danton Heinen had almost 20 as well. So, I think the Penguins, they have too many of these guys in the bottom 6. And I also think he's probably going to get a little too much money. The Penguins, a little too much money in free agency that the Penguins probably just don't have. They're going to have too many needs, I think, especially if Malkin does sign with another team. I do not think they would bring in Calle Jarnkrok. I don't think they would even have the space for it, at least in my opinion. So I wanted to get your question onto today's episode, and that'll do it for this episode. Happy July. It's a great time to be an NHL fan. The draft is next week. Free agency's right after that. We're going to be 5 days a week next week, the week after that. And then most of that next week, we go back to 3 days a week starting on July 25th. So basically 3 full weeks left of 5 episodes a week before, you're not going to get to hear my voice for 2 of your weekdays starting on at the end of July. So again, that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for a great month of June. Sure, the numbers did drop a little bit just because it's the off season. People take breaks, but before I was doing this, I would do the same thing. But, the numbers from this June compared to last June was not even close. Plus 100% in terms of listenership. Thank you all so much for continuing to make a lot of history on the show. The road to 500 YouTube subscribers continues to go. I'm almost at 350 right now. So I guess my more short-term goal is 400, but I would love to get to 500 in the next few months, hopefully before the regular season. But again, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you all have a great rest of your Friday, and I'll be back with another episode starting on Monday, the 4th of July.